Hi, this is Cindy Pope. I'm here at the Cool Tools Studio to show you how to make a beautiful mixed metal pendant. Let's start working on our project. I'm going to share with you the tools we need. We're going to need a heating surface, a copper domer. This is the largest one that Cool Tools carries. We're going to have a Trillion template. We're going to do the Nouveau Transition rollable texture tile. You need a little white tile, a little saran wrap. I'm going to have a healing tool. I have a dual holder with 2 Princeton brushes for 2 different metal slips. We're going to use little applicator brushes. I have some larger ones, smaller ones, tweezers. We need a pencil, and we're going to use the set of biopsy punches that Cool Tools sells. I'm going to use 1 Fireflex Dark Champagne Bronze and 1 Fireflex Pearl Gray Steel. We're going to have olive oil. We also need distilled water, and you need a pair of scissors. I have pre-rolled, according to my rolling video, textured Pearl Gray Steel 1 Fireflex clay. I have one that's 4 cards and one that's 2 cards. The 2 cards is going to be the overlay. The 4 cards is going to be the base. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw using a template on this, and I'm going to cut it out with scissors. And you can do that with any of the flex clays from Hadar or FS999 or EZ960. You want to make sure, if you want the texture centered, that you do that before you do your drawing. And the reason I'm drawing on the front of this one is because I do want this circle in the center. If it was a texture without any, you didn't care about the different, the centers, that you really wouldn't, you could go on the back. So I'm going to go with the next size smaller for the overlay. Now I'm going to cut it out using my Joyce Chen scissors, which are good for metals and for other things. Paper, clay, pretty much everything. Once I've got it cut, I'm going to go and do the other one. All the scrap can be reconstituted. So you just save it in a container, and I grind it up in a coffee grinder and then mix it just like I would Hadar's clays. And these flex clays reconstitute nicely. I'm going to move my scrap. So what I'm going to do is, this texture is going to be on the back, and this texture is going to be on the front. So I'm going to sand it a little bit evenly. I always like, before I join my pieces, I like to refine them. You want them really in nice shape before you join them together, because it's easier to finish a layer before you add it. Once I add this to the top, I'm not going to be able to get to these edges. So you want to make everything nice and neat before you move on to any second step. And this sand's really nice too. And it's already pretty flexible. I'm feeling a lot of flexibility in it, but we're going to dome these because I love a dome on a pendant. I think it really adds some movement to it. So in order to dome, I'm going to just sand the back. And for some reason, this is making it more flexible. I think I'm kind of moving it enough to get some additional flexibility. And I can see it's really flexible. I'm going to cut a hole in it because I'm going to add some little tiny balls. I'm using the 10mm punch. And I'm going to do it on top of a tile. I think you want a hard surface when you're doing this. The silicone mat is kind of soft. And I'm moving slowly. I'm kind of rocking it around. And now I've got a little extra piece I can use for something else. At this point, I need to figure which way is up and which way is down, and where the center is going to be. And I'm going to just round up the edges. I like my edges a little rounded. Round up the edges in the center. So now we're going to dome this. This one needs to be domed up. The other one needs to be domed down. So we're going to start by doming this one up. I always start on the top with flex clay. So you start to get the curve, but really to keep the curve, you have to go inside. So I'm going to go inside and then put it on the heating surface. Okay, now we're going to take our back and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to sand the back to make it more flexible. But in this case, the texture is going to be on the back of the piece. So I'm going to need to dome it the other way. So I have a second dome. And I'm going to check my flexibility. And this is a thicker piece of clay, so I'm going to have to probably sand it a little bit longer to get the flexibility I really want. And then I'm going to start by doming it this way on the front. And again, as always, when you're bending or doming any kind of flexible clay, be gentle and feel if it's getting too tight. But I just want to start the curve on the front. And these flexible clays are crazy that they're dry and they're this flexible. Now I'm going to move it over to the back. And I'm going to dome it inside. And I'm going to carefully push it down. I'm going to start on the edges and push it down gently. Once I've got it in there, I'm going to put it on the heating surface to try to set this curve. Okay, now that we're setting the curve by heating the clay in the doming trays, I'm going to show you how to roll little teeny tiny balls using the biopsy punches. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to put some olive oil on the surface. I never put it right on the surface. I'm going to put it on my hands first. But this is a little bit more olive oil than I use for rolling. Then I'm going to take some clay that I have mixed. I'm going to condition it a little bit and it's in really good shape. So I'm just going to put it down here and then I'm going to roll it flat. I don't need to roll it to cards. I just want to roll it a little bit. I'm going to spread the saran wrap over the top so it's flat. Then I'm going to take different size biopsy punch and I'm going to cut little circles. And then I'm going to roll them so I'll have a variety of different sizes of circles. We'll start with a little teeny one. I love the 2 and 3mm punches. They're just great. And I think it's a good idea if you enjoy using these. I really like the way they look. I pre-make a lot of balls and I just have them available. I make half balls, and this is how you would make a half ball. But in this case, because I want something down in a chamber, it's better to use a circular ball. It's going to look better and it's going to join better. I'm going to pull this over and I'm going to pull the clay off and poke these through. It doesn't really matter if you distort them because we're going to be rolling them. So at this point, I'm going to take the extra and put it back in saran wrap to use later. I'm only going to do one at a time because you can only, unfortunately, roll one at a time. Because I'm going to only use one at a time, I'm going to spritz it so they stay nice and damp. I'm going to take the first one, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to roll it in my hand. I don't want to add a lot of pressure. If you add a lot of pressure, you'll get an oval. Just touching the top and rolling in a circle. The reason I like to do a little dome first is I think it's easier to get it done. So I'm going to put this back on the rolling, or I'm going to leave it on this surface, because I don't want to pick it up once I've rolled it. So we're going to do a larger one. And everybody rolls balls a different way. This is how I like to do it. I took a class with Anna Mazzone, and she showed me how easy it was to roll little balls. So I'm going to continue until I have enough for the project. And we're going to heat these, and they'll be really dry when we add them to the clay. Okay, we have taken these off the heating surface, and I've sealed the curve in there by heating it. It's still flexible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of these domes, and in addition to, for doming, it's nice to build on when you have a dome piece. So I'm going to put this piece on top, and it's going to help me build. So I have to figure out exactly which part is up, and that's where I'm going to join it. I'm going to use my steel slip to join these two. I'm going to spray a little bit more distilled water in there. So it's very, very thin, almost water with a little clay on it. And I'm going to use this applicator, which has a lot of nap on the end, to circularly add that slip in water. And what it's doing is it's bringing up a little extra slip and rehydrating the surface so that we can have a really, really nice join. You can, in my opinion, you can't just throw slip on a dry piece and not kind of work it in. When I was new, a lot of my overlays would pop off, and so I've really gotten obsessed with making sure that doesn't happen anymore. Okay, now that this is all wet, I'm going to actually wet this part too, because it's going to receive that a lot better if it's got slip and it's wet also. This is soaking up the water, this particular clay. Every clay base metal clay has a different nature to it, but you do not want to oversaturate it. I need slip on the top, but I would not want it to soak all the way to the back. And you can see this one's already, it's a little damp on the surface, but it's already dried. So I'm going to just re-wet it a little bit. And that'll just activate that slip. I'm being careful with my fingers because I have a texture on the other side that's really perfect because it was dried, and I do not want to mess up that texture. So if you get steel or wetness on your fingers, you want to wipe it off. We're going to turn it over. And we're not going to press it down until we've got it right where you want it. You need to be right in front of it to make sure it's as centered as possible. And then you give it a little wiggle, and what it's going to do is the clays are going to catch to each other, and then you put pressure all the way around. I'm going to just add a little bit of slip here between the two to save myself some refining later. And then I'm going to put it in the dome back on the heating surface. And this I'm going to press in because that's going to help it join really, really well. While the piece is drying, I'm going to go ahead and make a simple bail. I just made a circular bail with a cutout using the biopsy punches. I want you to look at the back. I added a little accent piece. And I have a piece of scrap clay with no texture on it that's about 2 cards. I'm going to go ahead and make a 10mm circle. And then I'm going to cut a 5mm hole in it. In cutting the hole, I'm going to go pretty slowly and just rock it around. Till it's all the way through. Then I'm going to gently pull it off and we have a hole. I can make it bigger or smaller by just sanding the inside. I think I like it a little more substantial bail. This is a bigger piece than that one. So we're going to get it ready and let's remove our piece from the heating surface. And at this point, I'm not going to add the bail quite yet. I'm going to add all the balls that go in the inside. They're all dry and they're all different sizes. I'm going to take the slip from the slip container and I'm going to wet the inside. And that's also going to be reinforcing that edge. Then I'm going to take the balls one at a time and I'm going to make a little puddle of water inside the bronze container. We're going to take each one, and I usually start with the biggest one. I like to have them different sizes. They don't have to be different sizes, but I'm going to roll them around in the puddle, and what I'm doing is I'm rehydrating the surface of this ball. It's going to attach much, much better in the circle. And my rule is when I'm adding to a flat surface, I use half balls. When I'm adding to a layered surface, I use full balls. I think we're going to add a little bit of wet here. And put it in there. And I'm going to smush it a little bit so it catches. We're going to do the same thing with the next smaller ball. It's tough not to get these brushes mixed up. So we put it in a little puddle of slip water. And we're going to add a little bit of slip that's the steel. This will be mostly covered, but I always like to put steel with steel and bronze with bronze. It's less likely to be messy when you clean it up. And you could put as many balls in. You could just go with 2. This would be an interesting, really bright accent. I like to put a lot more in. So let's put a tiny one in and then we'll finish. I'm going to paint bronze onto the outside of this. It looks like the whole backing is bronze, but I've actually done the whole thing from steel and I'm just painting bronze on. Another example of that is I took this hibiscus texture and I added a few dots, but I actually painted the texture. And so it's a really good option if you want mixed metal pieces, but you don't want to roll 2 parts of clay. We can just mix up some slip and paint it on. I use about 4 coats. So we're going to start doing that with this one. I want really nice smooth slip, so I'm going to actually smush down any little lumps I have and then stir it. Okay, I'm going to take a larger brush and I'm actually going to wet this brush first. If you're a painter, you know if you wet a surface first and then you add paint on, it goes on more smoothly. My husband Joe is a painter. So I'm not really allowed to paint because I don't do it very well, but I did learn a few little tricks from him. It's still kind of warm, so it's drying. And this angle brush is nice for it because it's angling right along that edge. And the first coat is going to look a little muddy because you're going to see the steel underneath. But when this coat dries and I keep adding coats, it's going to look very bronzy. And this brush is making fast work of it. If you're brushing on a detail, you want to use that little, on a texture, you want to use that little Princeton brush because you don't want to get off the part you're trying to brush. But with this one, I want to go quickly. So I'm going to dry this, and then I'm going to go 4 more times at least, maybe 5. Okay, I'm finishing up my last coat. So I've got 4 coats on here. And now I'm going to reinforce the top of this. I'm going to use just straight water. By adding water on the top, what we're doing is we're joining these different balls to each other. I think I'm going to get a little bit more water. And as it soaks in, it's going to join them to the steel too. And it's going to soak down in there. And plus I'm also smoothing them when I'm doing this. And then I'm going to go from the edge and put steel down there, just in case that water would come down and leave a ring of bronze, which I don't want on the piece. I'm just going to go in, and this little brush is perfect for this, underneath, and add steel. Okay, now we're ready to put the bail on. Let me tell you a little bit, in case you think you might like to take this bronze and paint it onto your silver. Bronze and silver are not friends. If you put them together, you'll get a big degraded mess. For some reason, they seem to eat into each other. The bronze eats into the silver, so don't paint this onto silver. But you can paint it onto any of the high fire clays. And let's put that bail on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a little thinner up at the top, just with my scalpel. I love a scalpel. They are for surgery though, so be careful. I often warn people about the dangers and then proceed to cut myself. And in every class I get either a tissue blade or a scalpel cut. I just want it a little bit thinner up at the top. So I'm going to put a large jump ring in it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wet sand that just like this. Make it nice and smooth. We're going to turn our piece over and we're going to add it on right here. So what you want to do is we're going to put slip in both places. And I'm going to put a little bit heavier slip because there is a texture here. And then I'm going to pick up slip on this whole thing, even though I'm only putting half of it on. And I think with something this small, it's easier to put it on with a tweezer. So you want to place it, you want to make sure it's centered, and then you're going to move it back and forth. And then I'm going to put a little bronze dot right in the middle. I think that adds a cute accent on the inside. So we're going to add a little slip for it to add to. I'm going to take and wet it and rehydrate it like we did with the other dots. And this is a flat dot because I'm going to when I sand this, it's gonna get flat even if it isn't flat now. So I might as well just start with a flat dot. And we're gonna go ahead and dry it. Okay, we finished our piece and dried it and refined it. We're gonna load it into the bowl. This is a silica bowl. This is a bowl you can use with carbon firings and not have any spalling. It's 6 inches, so it's gonna fit in almost every kiln that Cool Tools sells. You wanna have at least 1 inch on the bottom. And then you can put this in and kind of push it down so the dome stays. If you have a couple pieces, you can also angle them like that, but be sure that they have 1 inch of carbon on the bottom. So I'm going to put this one like that. And then you want to cover it with at least 2 inches of carbon. And then you're going to fire according to my firing instructions on Hadar's product page. Have fun.
Visit our Learning Center at cooltools.us for more cool jewelry making videos. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and be sure to sign up for our email list to be the first to hear about new videos, new products, and other cool stuff from Cool Tools.